Welcome to a romantic guy love story, Red Heart. If you enjoy emotional and heart-touching stories like this, please like and subscribe to my channel. I will bring you more beautiful and romantic stories every day. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Preetam was lying beneath Manish, his hands tightly held in Manish's grasp. Their eyes were locked onto each other as if the world around them had completely disappeared. Slowly, the distance between them began to fade. Their lips moved closer, and even closer, until their breaths started to mix. Their hearts were racing so fast that the sound echoed in their ears like a constant ringing bell, dock, louder with every passing second. It felt as though the blood rushing through their veins could outrun time itself. In that moment, nothing else mattered. No society, no fear, no consequences, just the two of them, lost in each other's presence. When Manish's lips gently brushed against Preetam's, a sudden wave of sensation ran through Preetam's entire body. Goosebumps rose on his skin, and his breath trembled. He softly said, "Don't do this, Manish. This isn't right." Manish looked at him with deep emotion and replied, "Why isn't it right? I love you. Don't you love me?" Preetam hesitated for a second, then admitted, "I do love you. But, is all of this between us really okay?" Manish didn't step back. Instead, he spoke with confidence, "If you love me and I love you, then what's wrong in that?" Preetam closed his eyes, trying to calm the storm inside him. "Nothing is wrong," he said quietly, "I just don't want things to become awkward between us." Manish smiled faintly, "What awkwardness? You are mine and I am yours. What more do we need?" Those words melted Preetam's resistance. He slowly let go of his hesitation and allowed Manish to come closer. Their lips met again, but this time there was no stopping. They kissed deeply, losing themselves completely. Time slipped away unnoticed, minutes passed like seconds. Their bodies reacted in ways they had never experienced before, a strange mixture of warmth, tension, and longing building inside them. It was overwhelming, confusing, yet undeniably real. Eventually, they broke apart, breathless and startled by their own intensity, and hurried toward the bathroom. After some time, they returned, slightly embarrassed but unable to stop smiling. Manish looked at Preetam and teased, "You too?" Preetam nodded shyly, "Yeah, me too." Both of them burst into laughter, trying to ease the awkwardness. Preetam then said, "Don't do this again, okay?" Manish raised an eyebrow, "Why not? I love you. If I love you, why shouldn't I?" Hearing those words gave Preetam a strange sense of comfort. "I love you too," he admitted, "a lot. But this world—" Before he could finish, Manish interrupted confidently, "Why are you so scared of the world? I'm a black belt in karate. If anyone says anything, I'll deal with them." Preetam sighed, "That's exactly what I'm afraid of. What if you actually hurt someone? And even if you do, how many people will you fight? I'm with you, that should be enough. Why do we need to announce it to the world?" Those words didn't sit well with Manish. He stood up, hurt and frustrated. Without saying another word, he walked away. Preetam called out to him, but Manish didn't turn back. That moment created a distance between them that lasted for years. They didn't meet again until much later in life, when Preetam had become a police officer and Manish came for passport verification. Even then, Preetam lacked the courage he once needed, and perhaps still needed. He was honest in his profession, but not in his own heart. When Manish's turn came, Preetam completed his work, trying to start a conversation, but Manish showed no interest. He ignored him completely and left. Late that night, around midnight, Manish's phone rang. The number looked familiar. He ignored the first call, but the phone kept ringing again and again. Finally, he picked it up. It was Preetam. "Why did you leave like that?" Preetam asked softly. "You could have stayed, we could have talked." Manish's anger immediately surfaced. "Oh really? I just came for my work and left? I came to meet you, but you were too busy being honest. Where did that honesty go when I confessed my feelings to you? Back then, you chose society over me. And now you're trying to lecture me?" Without waiting for a response, Manish hung up. But Preetam didn't stop. He kept calling. Manish silenced his phone and lay down, closing his eyes. 2 hours passed. When he finally checked his phone, there were more than 100 missed calls. At that moment, he realized something. Preetam still loved him, just as deeply as before. The problem wasn't love, it was courage. And that was something Manish could never accept easily. The next morning arrived with a strange mix of anticipation and unease in Manish's heart. He hadn't slept properly the entire night. Preetam's voice, those 100 missed calls, and the emotions buried deep inside him kept surfacing again and again. He wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the same way, but he wasn't at peace either. Love was still there, strong as ever, but it was layered with hurt, disappointment, and a lingering question. Had Preetam really changed? Or was this just another moment of weakness that would fade when faced with reality? Manish stood in front of the mirror, staring at his own reflection. He looked the same, but something inside him had evolved over the years. He had learned to accept himself, to understand his feelings, and most importantly, to live without fear. That was something Preetam had never been able to do before. And today, Manish wanted answers, not just words, but proof. He didn't want promises anymore, he wanted truth in action. On the other side, Preetam was equally restless. He had barely slept. Every moment of the past replayed in his mind. Their first touch, their first kiss, the way he let fear ruin something so pure. He regretted everything. Becoming a police officer had given him discipline, respect, and a sense of responsibility, but it hadn't filled the emptiness Manish left behind. No matter how busy life got, no matter how many people he met, there was always a part of him that belonged only to Manish. When they finally decided to meet, the air between them was heavy with unspoken emotions. It wasn't like before. There was familiarity, but also distance. They chose a crowded marketplace to meet, a place full of noise, people, and movement. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe Manish wanted to see how Preetam would react in public, surrounded by the very society he once feared. Manish spotted Preetam first. He was standing near a small cafe, dressed in his uniform, looking both confident and nervous at the same time. For a moment, Manish just watched him from a distance. There was something different about him, a certain steadiness in his posture, a seriousness in his eyes. But was that enough? Manish walked toward him slowly. As soon as Preetam saw him, his face softened. There was a quiet relief in his expression, like someone who had been waiting for this moment for years. "You came," Preetam said, his voice low but filled with emotion. Manish nodded, keeping his composure. "You called 100 times. I figured it must be important." There was a brief silence. Neither of them knew how to begin. Words felt small compared to everything they had been through. So Manish decided not to rely on words at all. Without saying anything, he reached out and held Preetam's hand. It was a simple gesture, but in that crowded place, it carried weight. People were passing by, some glancing casually, others not noticing at all. Manish didn't look at them. His eyes were fixed on Preetam, watching closely, waiting for a reaction. Preetam froze for a second. This was the moment, the exact kind of moment he had once been afraid of. The world was right there. Society was right there. Judgment, whispers, opinions, everything he used to fear was within reach. But something inside him had changed. Instead of pulling his hand away, Preetam tightened his grip. Manish noticed. A faint, almost invisible smile appeared on his lips. It wasn't victory, it was relief. Maybe, just maybe, Preetam was telling the truth. They started walking together, still holding hands. It felt strange at first, but also natural, like something that was always meant to be. Preetam's heartbeat was fast, but not out of fear this time. It was excitement, nervousness, and a quiet courage building inside him. After a while, they entered a restaurant. It was moderately crowded, with families, couples, and groups of friends sitting around. They chose a corner table and sat down. The waiter came, they ordered food, but neither of them was really focused on eating. Manish leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So," he said, "is this the new you?" Preetam looked at him seriously. "This is the real me, the one I should have been back then." Manish didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for Pritam's hand again, this time placing it on the table. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted it and pressed a soft kiss on it. A couple sitting nearby noticed. There was a brief glance, a whisper, but nothing more. Manisha's eyes returned to Pritam. He was still watching him, testing him. Pritam didn't react negatively. He didn't pull away. If anything, he looked calmer than before. "Are you testing me?" he asked gently. Manish tilted his head slightly. "Maybe." Pritam smiled faintly. "I'm not going to fail this time." There was sincerity in his voice, something that Manish could feel. But he wasn't done yet. He stood up. Pritam looked confused. "What are you doing?" Manish walked around the table, came closer, and before Pritam could fully process it, he leaned down and kissed him lightly on the cheek. This time, more people noticed. A few eyes turned. Someone paused mid-conversation. The air shifted slightly. But Pritam didn't move. He didn't panic. He didn't look around nervously. Instead, he looked up at Manish with a calm, steady expression. Then he said quietly, "If you're going to test me, at least make it harder." Manish blinked, surprised. "What?" Before he could react, Pritam stood up and gently held his face. There was a brief pause, a silent question in his eyes. Manish didn't step back. And in that moment, Pritam leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. When they pulled apart, the world was still there. People were still watching. But something had shifted, not outside, but inside Pritam. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. Manish looked at him, his expression softer now. The anger, the doubt, it was slowly fading. "What changed?" he asked quietly. Pritam took a deep breath. "Losing you." That answer hit differently. "I realized," Pritam continued, "that I was living for everyone else, except myself. And in doing that, I lost the one person who mattered the most. I don't want to do that again. Not for society, not for fear, not for anything." Manish sat down again, absorbing his words. "And what if things get difficult?" he asked. "What if people talk? What if they judge?" Pritam smiled slightly. "They will. But this time, I won't run." There was a long silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where understanding begins to grow. For the first time in years, Manish felt like he was not alone in this anymore. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. After that moment in the restaurant, something deep and unspoken shifted between Pritam and Manish. It wasn't just about proving courage anymore. It was about rebuilding everything they had lost. The silence that followed their conversation was no longer heavy. Instead, it carried a quiet understanding. Both of them knew that love had never disappeared between them. It had only been buried under fear, time, and unspoken pain. They finished their meal slowly, occasionally exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. Every small gesture felt meaningful. The way their hands brushed against each other on the table, the way they smiled without realizing it, the way their eyes softened whenever they met. It was as if they were rediscovering each other, piece by piece. When they stepped out of the restaurant, the evening had begun to settle in. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and purple, and a cool breeze moved gently through the streets. For a moment, they just stood there, side by side, unsure of what to do next. Years ago, this would have been the moment where hesitation took over. But not anymore. Manish broke the silence. "Walk with me," he said simply. Pritam nodded without hesitation. They started walking down the busy street, surrounded by people who were caught up in their own lives. There was noise, laughter, traffic, but somehow, it all felt distant. After a few steps, Manish slowly reached out again and intertwined his fingers with Pritam's. This time, it didn't feel like a test. It felt natural. Pritam didn't just accept it, he held on firmly. As they walked, Manish spoke, his voice calm but serious. "You know, loving someone isn't the hard part. The hard part is standing by that love when everything around you tells you not to." Pritam listened carefully. "I know," he replied. "And I failed at that before." Manish stopped walking and turned toward him. "You didn't just fail, Pritam. You chose them over me. Over us." Those words carried pain even now. Preetam didn't defend himself. He didn't try to justify anything. "You're right," he said quietly. "I did. And I regret it every single day." Manish searched his face, trying to see if there was any doubt left in him, but there wasn't. There was only honesty. "I don't need perfect," Manish said after a pause. "I just need real." "Can you be real all the time? Not just when it's easy?" Preetam took a deep breath. "I can't promise that it'll always be easy," he admitted. "But I can promise that I won't run away again. No matter what happens, I'll face it with you." Those words held weight. They weren't dramatic or exaggerated, they were simple but sincere. They resumed walking, this time more slowly. The street eventually led them to a quieter area, away from the crowd. There was a small park nearby, dimly lit with streetlights casting soft glows on the pathways. They entered without saying anything and found a bench under a tree. For a while they just sat there. Manish leaned back slightly, looking up at the sky. "Do you remember that day?" he asked suddenly. "Which one?" Preetam replied. "The day everything changed," Manish said. "The day I walked away." Preetam's expression softened with sadness. "I remember every second of it." Manish let out a small sigh. "I thought, if I left, maybe it would hurt less. But it didn't. It just stayed." Preetam looked down at his hands. "It stayed with me too," he said. "I tried to forget, tried to move on, but I couldn't. No one ever felt right after you." Manish turned his head slightly, looking at him. "Same," he admitted. There was something comforting in that shared truth. It meant their story had never really ended, it had just paused. After a moment, Manish shifted closer. "Tell me something honestly," he said. "All these years, did you ever come close to telling someone else? About yourself, about us?" Preetam shook his head. "No. I kept everything inside. I thought it was easier that way." "And was it?" Manish asked. Preetam gave a faint, almost sad smile. "No. It was lonely." That word hung in the air for a moment. Manish understood that loneliness. He had felt it too, even though he had chosen to live more openly. Being honest with yourself didn't always mean the world would accept you, but at least you weren't hiding from yourself. "You don't have to be lonely anymore," Manish said softly. Preetam looked at him, his eyes filled with something deeper than just affection. "Not if you're with me," he replied. Manish didn't respond with words. Instead, he leaned his head lightly against Preetam's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it carried years of longing, forgiveness, and unspoken love. Preetam hesitated for just a second. Then he gently rested his head against Manish's. Time seemed to slow down again, just like it had years ago, but this time, there was no fear attached to it. After a while, Manish spoke again, his voice quieter now. "If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back." Preetam nodded. "I know. It means being honest," Manish continued. "Not just with each other, but with the world too, at least to some extent." "I understand," Preetam said. "It means people might talk. They might judge. Some might even try to hurt us, emotionally or otherwise." Preetam's expression turned serious. "Let them," he said firmly. "I'm not scared anymore." Manish lifted his head slightly, studying him. "And what about your job? Your reputation? You're a police officer, Preetam. That's not something people take lightly." Preetam looked straight ahead, thinking for a moment. "I became a police officer to stand for what's right," he said slowly. "If I can't even stand for my own truth, then what's the point of anything?" That answer stayed with Manish. It wasn't just about love anymore. It was about identity, courage, and self-respect. Manish smiled faintly. "You've changed," he said. Preetam returned the smile. "Maybe I've just finally become who I was always supposed to be." The night grew deeper around them, but neither of them wanted to leave. There was too much to say, too much to feel, and too much to rebuild. Eventually, Manish stood up and extended his hand toward Preetam. "Come on," he said. Preetam looked at his hand for a moment, then took it. "Where are we going?" he asked. Manish smirked slightly. "Forward." That single word carried meaning far beyond the moment. And as they walked out of the park together, hand in hand, it no longer felt like they were picking up from where they left off. It felt like they were starting something entirely new. As they stepped out of the park, the night felt calmer, almost as if the world itself had slowed down to give them space. The streetlights cast long shadows behind them, and the air carried a quiet stillness that matched the peace slowly growing between them. For the first time in years, neither Preetam nor Manish felt like they were running from society, from fear, or from their own emotions. Instead, they were walking forward, together, with a sense of purpose that had been missing before. They didn't rush to say goodbye. In fact, neither of them wanted the night to end. Manish suggested they go for a long drive, just to talk without interruptions. Preetam agreed instantly. Soon, they were sitting inside Preetam's car, the soft hum of the engine filling the silence as they drove through nearly empty roads. The city lights blurred past them, creating a strange but comforting atmosphere. For a while, they didn't speak. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. Sometimes, silence between two people means distance. But this silence meant closeness. Manish finally broke it. I used to imagine this moment a lot, he said, looking out of the window. Preetam glanced at him briefly. What moment? This? Like this, Manish replied. Together again. But every time I imagined it, I also imagined you pulling away. I never thought you'd actually stay. Preetam tightened his grip on the steering wheel slightly. I don't blame you, he said. I gave you every reason to think that way. Manish turned to look at him. Then why now? What changed so much that you're ready to risk everything? Preetam took a deep breath before answering. Because I realized that living without you wasn't really living. I had everything, respect, a career, stability, but none of it felt complete. It felt like I was just existing, not living. Manish listened quietly. I used to think fear was protecting me, Preetam continued. But all it did was take away the one thing that mattered the most. I don't want to lose that again. Not for anything. There was a sincerity in his voice that couldn't be faked. Manish could feel it. The car eventually slowed down near a quiet roadside area, away from the city noise. Preetam parked the car, and they both stepped out. The sky above was clear, filled with stars that seemed brighter away from the city lights. A cool breeze passed by, making the moment feel even more real. Manish leaned against the car, folding his arms. You're saying all the right things, he said, but life isn't just about moments like these. What about tomorrow? What about when reality hits again? Preetam walked closer to him. Then we deal with it together, he said simply. Manish shook his head slightly. It's not that simple. I know, Preetam replied. But it's not impossible either. There was a pause. Manish looked at him carefully. If someone from your department finds out, what then? What if it affects your job? Preetam didn't hesitate this time. Then I face it, he said firmly. I've spent enough time hiding. I'm tired of living a half-life. Manish studied his expression, trying to find even a trace of doubt, but there wasn't any. That confidence, that calm determination, it was new, but it felt real. You really mean it, don't you? Manish asked quietly. Preetam nodded. I do. Manish looked away for a moment, his thoughts racing. For years, he had wanted exactly this, to hear Preetam say these things, to see him stand strong without fear. And now that it was finally happening, it felt almost unreal. You know what scares me now? Manish said after a while. Preetam frowned slightly. What? That I might believe you, and then lose you all over again. Those words hit deeply. Preetam stepped even closer. You won't, he said softly. You can't promise that, Manish replied. I can promise that I won't walk away, Preetam said. No matter how hard things get, I'll stay. Manish's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of hesitation. Staying isn't enough sometimes, he said. You have to fight too. Preetam gave a small smile. Then I'll fight. There was something powerful in the simplicity of that answer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence returned, but it felt heavier this time, filled with emotions that were difficult to put into words. Then, slowly, Manish stepped forward. He was close now, close enough to feel Pritam's breath, close enough to hear his heartbeat. There was no hesitation this time, no testing, no doubts holding him back. He placed his hand gently on Pritam's chest, right over his heart. "It's still racing," Manish said softly. Pritam smiled faintly. "It always does, when you're this close." Manish looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of fear, but all he saw was love. And that was enough. Without saying anything, Manish leaned in and kissed him. This time, it wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was slow, deep, and full of meaning. It carried everything they had been through, the pain, the distance, the longing, and the love that had survived it all. Pritam responded instantly, pulling him closer, as if he never wanted to let go again. The world around them didn't matter in that moment. There were no people watching, no judgments, no expectations, just two hearts finally finding their way back to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless, but there was a quiet happiness in their eyes. Manish rested his forehead against Pritam's. This is what I wanted," he whispered. Pritam closed his eyes for a second, taking in the moment. "Me too." They stayed like that for a while, just holding each other, letting the reality of it all sink in. After some time, Manish spoke again. "So what now?" Pritam opened his eyes and looked at him. "Now, we stop hiding." Manish raised an eyebrow slightly. "That sounds easy when you say it like that." Pritam chuckled softly. "It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it." Manish thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Pritam repeated. "Yeah," Manish said with a small smile. "Let's do it. Properly this time." There was a sense of finality in those words, not an ending, but a beginning. Pritam couldn't help but smile. "Properly," he echoed. They got back into the car, but this time, the energy between them was different. It wasn't uncertain anymore. It was steady, warm, and real. As they drove back toward the city, hand in hand, neither of them knew exactly what the future would bring. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments of fear, but there would also be love, honesty, and the strength to face it all together. And for the first time, that was enough. The days that followed marked a new beginning for Pritam and Manish, one that was no longer hidden behind fear or hesitation. It wasn't like a fairy tale where everything suddenly became perfect. In fact, reality came in slowly, testing them in ways they had both expected and some they hadn't. But the difference this time was simple: they were no longer alone in facing it. At first, their world remained small. They spent time together quietly, long walks, late-night conversations, simple dinners, and moments of silence that now felt comforting instead of heavy. Every day, they learned something new about each other, not as they were in the past, but as they had become over time. Love, they realized, wasn't just about intense moments or passion. It was about understanding, patience, and showing up even on the days when things felt uncertain. One evening, as they sat together in Manish's apartment, the topic they had both been avoiding finally came up. "So, when do we tell people?" Manish asked, his tone calm but serious. Pritam looked at him, knowing this moment would come. "Soon," he said. "But maybe not all at once." Manish sighed lightly. "I'm not asking you to announce it to the whole world in one day. But I don't want to feel like a secret again." "You won't," Pritam replied immediately. "I promise." There was a pause before Manish spoke again. "Then let's start with someone close. Someone you trust." Pritam thought for a moment. There were many people in his life, colleagues, acquaintances, but very few he truly trusted. Finally, one name came to his mind. "There's someone," he said slowly. "A friend from work. Just different. Open-minded. I think he'll understand." Manish nodded. "Then let's start there." A few days later, Pritam found himself sitting across from his colleague at a small cafe. His heart was racing, not because he was unsure of his feelings, but because this was the first real step into the world he had once been afraid of. Manish wasn't there physically, but his presence was felt in every breath Pritam took. After a few moments of hesitation, Pritam finally spoke. He didn't over-explain or try to justify anything. He simply told the truth, about himself, about Manish, about everything he had been hiding for years. There was silence after he finished. For a brief moment, that old fear returned. The fear of judgment, rejection, or disappointment. But then his friend smiled. "That's it," he said casually. "I thought you were going to tell me something serious." Preetam blinked, surprised. You're okay with it?" His friend shrugged lightly. "Why wouldn't I be? You're still the same person. If anything, you seem more honest now." That simple response felt like a weight lifting off Preetam's chest. It wasn't dramatic or emotional, but it was acceptance. And for someone who had spent years hiding, that meant everything. When Preetam told Manish about it later, Manish couldn't help but smile. "See? Not everyone is against us." Preetam nodded. "I know. I just wish I had realized that sooner." From there, things started to change gradually. They didn't rush into telling everyone, but they stopped hiding. They went out together more often, talked openly, and allowed themselves to exist as a couple without constantly looking over their shoulders. Of course, not every reaction was positive. There were moments when people stared a little too long, whispered among themselves, or made subtle comments. But this time, it didn't break them. Whenever those moments came, Preetam would remember his promise: to stay, to fight, to not run away again. And every time he chose to stand beside Manish, it made their bond stronger. One day, while walking through a crowded street, someone made a passing remark, something mocking, something meant to provoke. Manish tensed slightly, ready to respond, but before he could react, Preetam gently squeezed his hand. "Let it go," Preetam said calmly. Manish looked at him, surprised. "You're okay with that?" Preetam nodded. "I don't need to prove anything to them. I know who I am, and I know who you are to me." That moment said more than any argument ever could. Manish smiled faintly. "You've really changed." Preetam looked at him with warmth. "Maybe I've just stopped being afraid of myself." Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day, not because everything was easy, but because they chose each other every single time. They learned to communicate better, to understand each other's fears, and to support each other in ways they hadn't before. One night, as they sat together on the rooftop of Manish's building, looking at the city lights spread out before them, there was a sense of calm that neither of them had felt in a long time. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we never met again?" Manish asked. Preetam thought for a moment. "I don't think I would have ever truly been happy," he said honestly. Manish nodded. "Same." There was a brief silence before Preetam spoke again. "But we did meet again. And this time, we didn't let it slip away." Manish smiled softly. "Yeah, this time, we didn't." Preetam reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. There was no hesitation now, no fear of being seen. Just a quiet confidence in what they had built together. "Whatever happens next," Preetam said, "we face it together." Manish squeezed his hand gently. "Together," he repeated. And as they sat there, surrounded by the vastness of the world that once felt so intimidating, it no longer seemed so overwhelming. Because in the end, it wasn't about fighting the entire world. It was about finding one person who made it worth facing everything. Their story wasn't perfect. It had scars, mistakes, and moments of doubt. But it also had something stronger than all of that: love that had been tested, broken, and rebuilt into something unshakable. And this time, it wasn't just a feeling. It was a choice they made every single day.